What's going on, everybody? My name is Joe Guerrero and I am a prison specialist, which means that I've spent most of my life locked up, which probably isn't something I should be very proud of. But today I'm here to tell you everything that you need to know about the prisoner strike taking place right now. And there's also the potential by the end of this video, you might not like me. But I'm here to give it to you as real as it gets with all of the facts, and I guarantee a lot of things that you may not be aware of at all. On August 21st, just a few days ago, prisoners across 17 states began what they consider a peaceful protest, demanding humane living conditions, access to rehabilitation, sentencing reform, and the end to modern-day slavery. Now, the first crazy thing to mention about all of this is the date in particular in which prisoners decided to begin this peaceful protest, August the 21st, which was symbolically timed to mark the 47th anniversary of the death of Black Panthers leader George Jackson in San Quentin Prison in California. Now, George Jackson died on August 21st, 1971 during a failed prison escape. In fact, while he was being escorted back to his cell, he was somehow able to get his hands on the gun of the officer who was then escorting him, then take that guard hostage, make that guard open up all of the cells, and then was able to take additional hostages. And all of this would end with 5 casualties, a mix of guards and other prisoners, and an additional 3 other people being stabbed and shot and somehow miraculously surviving this incident. George Jackson himself was also killed in the process of all of this as well. And this is the date that prisoners decided they wanted to mark and symbolically coincide with their peaceful protest that just began this August the 21st, 47 years since this George Jackson incident took place. Now, there's also a cutoff date to this prisoner strike as well, and that is September the 9th, which also goes down in prison history as a not so peaceful and also extremely violent day. On September the 9th, also 47 years ago as well, a major uprising took place at Attica State Prison where 2,200 prisoners overtook this entire prison, which would lead to 43 people being killed in the process, including 10 correctional officers and other staff, and also 33 prisoners. And you know, my opinion, which probably doesn't amount to much of anything and is only just that, my opinion, you know, if you wanted to begin and end a peaceful protest inside of the prison, striking and demanding change, these guys most certainly chose some violent days to coincide the start and the end of this nationwide prisoner strike. Now, for those of you who don't know, let me share with you exactly what these prisoners are protesting and striking for. What I've got right here is a press release for the National Prisoner Strike from August the 21st to September the 9th of 2018. And this is a list of the 10 demands that they want to see some change happen with. Number 1 being an immediate improvement to the conditions of prisons and prison policies that recognize the humanity of imprisoned men and women. Number 2, an immediate end to prison slavery. All persons imprisoned in any place or detention center under United States jurisdiction must be paid the prevailing wage in their state or territory for their labor. You know what this sounds like to me? These guys are thinking that they're going to get minimum wage. The prevailing rate? What does that even mean right there? When I was locked up myself, I served 7 years. Throughout that time, I had many different prison jobs. Some of those jobs paid anywhere between like 27 cents an hour and 45 cents an hour. I saw prisoners who were getting 55 cents, 85 cents an hour. Some were even getting only 21 or 17 cents an hour if all they were doing was just going to school. Yes, that is not very much money to be making, but again, we're locked up. We are in prison. This isn't the Hilton. We are not on the streets. Some of these prisoners who are protesting are in states where they're making 30-something plus cents an hour, upwards of $1, $2, $3 an hour. And these guys are wanting the prevailing rate. You know, I really want to know what all of you think about this, so please comment below and let me know exactly what your thoughts on this situation are. The third demand is the Prison Litigation Reform Act, which must be rescinded, allowing imprisoned humans a proper channel to address grievances and violations of their rights. This is something that I can totally understand, something I can totally get behind. I know firsthand that while locked up, if you've got a complaint or a grievance, as it's oftentimes called, that can oftentimes fall on deaf ears. And so some sort of reform to the grievance and complaint policy is exactly what I hope comes from this peaceful prisoner strike. Number 4, the Truth in Sentencing Act and the Sentencing Reform Act must be rescinded so that imprisoned humans have a possibility of rehabilitation and parole. No human should be sentenced to death by incarceration or serve any sentence without the possibility of parole. What they want to do right here is get rid of life sentences altogether. Bring back parole, which here in the state of Virginia hasn't been available since I think like 1995. But you know, this is going to sound absolutely crazy because I'm somebody who served most of my time locked up. Me personally, my own personal opinion, there are most certainly people who deserve a life sentence. You've got some very bad people locked up. And you know what? They deserve just that, to spend the rest of their life behind bars. You might not agree with that, and you might not be of the same belief as me, or you might find it crazy that I have that belief as somebody who's been locked up. But trust and believe, I will be the first to tell you, there most certainly are some guys who are there for the rest of their life who deserve to be there. But then again, on the flip side of the coin, you've also got some guys who are locked up right now who don't deserve to be there. Locked up for something they didn't do at all. Number 5, an immediate end to racial overcharging over sentencing and parole denials of black and brown humans. Black humans should no longer be denied parole because the victim of the crime was white, which is a particular problem in the southern states. You know, this is something that I can't really speak on because I've never dealt with this. But I will most certainly admit I have seen black dudes go to court and get their boots absolutely smoked inside of that courtroom. Whereas the next guy goes in, hell, it could have been me walking in that courtroom, and maybe I don't get as much time as a black dude walking inside of that courtroom. I will most certainly agree there's a lot of racism inside the judicial system. Number 6, an immediate end to racist gang enhancement laws targeting black and brown humans. Number 7, no imprisoned human shall be denied access to rehabilitation programs at their place of detention because they are labeled as a violent offender. I completely agree with that. If you're a violent offender and you're being denied a rehabilitation program like re-entry because of your status, because of your crimes, because of your record, and you've got a release date, why are they not going to give you rehabilitative services when you are getting released? Most certainly, this is another thing that I hope does get some recognition and some change from this prisoner strike. Number 8. State prisons must be funded specifically to offer more rehabilitative services. You know, I'll be the first to admit, though they do have things like re-entry and some types of rehabilitative programs like Ready to Work, Thinking for a Change, there's a lot more things that could be done in that department. However, all of these things cost money. I'm not exactly sure how much money the prison system has. I know it has a lot, so maybe this is another thing that they could address as well. Number 9, Pell Grants must be reinstated in all U.S. states and territories. You know, back in the day, and this was just getting phased out while I was in prison, but way back in the day, prisoners were able to take college courses. They were able to apply and then be granted, while incarcerated, Pell Grants to pay for education. And I'm not exactly sure why that was phased out, but that most certainly is something they should definitely reenact. If you're talking about rehabilitation, what better way to do so than through education? The final thing on their list of demands here is number 10, the voting rights of all confined citizens serving prison sentences, pretrial detainees, and so-called ex-felons must be counted. Representation is demanded. All voices count. You know, I think I fall into one of those categories right there, an ex-felon. Actually, I'm still a felon. I've been released from prison now for about 3 years, and I still can't vote. I don't have any voting rights. I know in certain states, after being released, it's easier to obtain your voting rights than in other states. I know just down in Texas a few months ago, a woman who was on parole went and voted not knowing she wasn't able to do so, and she got sentenced to 5 years back in prison just for voting. I'm not exactly sure what could be done for those who are incarcerated if it will ever become a thing where they'll actually be able to vote while locked up. But you know, once you do get released, I think it should be a little bit more easy to get your voting rights back, because guess what? You're back out here in the free world. Your voice should most certainly count, especially if you're out here working, trying to get your life back on the right track and doing the right thing. My own personal opinion of these 10 demands that these prisoners have, why they are doing this peaceful protest, some of these I don't think there's going to be any changes made to these. Better pay. I'm not exactly sure they're going to do that. Getting rid of life sentences. I can't never see them doing that. But other things such as the Pell Grant, more rehabilitative services, those are some very valid complaints. The grievance and complaint system inside of the prison is absolutely flawed. I can't emphasize enough that you will have a valid complaint at least 10 times while serving any amount of time, and most all of the time, those complaints, those grievances, they're going to fall on deaf ears. Now that I've shared with you the list of demands of what these prisoners are striking for, let me tell you now how they're carrying out this peaceful protest. There's 4 different ways that they're going about this. The first being work strikes. Prisoners are refusing to work. Most prisons, most every prison that I've ever heard of, that I've ever been in, most of the work done inside of that prison is done by the prison population. Having a prison job, working in the kitchen, cooking the food, preparing the meals, most any type of cleaning, laundry, most any work that has to be done inside of a prison to keep that place operational is done so by the prisoners. And again, right now, prisoners, they are refusing to go to work. Again, they want those better wages. They're also doing sit-ins, which I don't really know what a sit-in is. Peacefully protesting in some type of a group, just sitting down, maybe talking about things like, hey, I really hope they take us serious. I don't exactly know what a sit-in is. However, I do know this. If a bunch of prisoners are congregating in a certain area, like the day room or on the rec yard, and those guards come up and say, hey, look, whatever you're doing right there, you need to get up and go back to your bunk area, back to your cell, back to the housing unit, whatever, and they refuse to do so, and they refuse to move, I can guarantee you that peaceful protest sit-in, it is not going to remain peaceful for very long. They're also boycotting, saying that they're not going to do things like go to the commissaries. They're not going to spend any money to give these prisons any money. They're not going to pay for those phone calls. In fact, they're telling their loved ones, don't send any money during this time at all. I can tell you one thing. If you've got money and you're able to go to the commissary, going without most certainly is a tough thing. They already don't feed you worth nothing while locked up. That should have been on that list of demands. I didn't see nothing about the food. And because of that, commissary is a major thing. But they're boycotting any kind of financial gain that the prisoners or the families of the prisoners are going to be giving to these prisons. And finally, probably the craziest way that they're carrying out this prisoner protest is through hunger strikes. Certain prisoners are refusing meals, refusing to eat or drink anything. And in some cases, these prisoners will carry out these hunger strikes for days. Now, as I wrap this up, I want to include just a few more really interesting facts. Again, these prisoners are protesting and striking, demanding change for a list of different things. One of those, again, being the end to modern-day slavery, which is really interesting considering I just read in an article that now today, right here in the United States, there are more people who are locked up than anywhere in the world. That's probably something that you already knew. But with that, did you know that today there are currently more black people who are locked up than those who were enslaved back in 1850. This is also the second prisoner strike to be carried out in the last 2 years. In fact, just back in 2016, there was another prisoner strike that was basically the same as this one that's taking place right now. Starting on August the 21st, ending on September the 9th. That one involved 20 states. This one involved 17 states. And during that strike, prisoners were protesting, demanding changes to pretty much the same things. And it was also documented that something like 24,000 prisoners took part in that prisoner strike back in 2016. But despite the large number of prisoners who did partake in that strike, little media coverage or even change came from that. This year's strike, however, was triggered by a riot that took place just a few months ago down in South Carolina at Lee Correctional Center, where 7 prisoners died in what was the deadliest prison unrest in the last quarter of a century. And this riot that took place was fueled by gang rivalry over contraband, lasting for over 7 hours, while prison guards supposedly did next to nothing to stop it. It's been stated that within days of this South Carolina carnage that took place, a renewed spotlight has been put on the gross overcrowding, understaffing, and also inhumane living conditions that pretty much are widespread across this country. And also is where the idea of this prisoner strike first began to form. But even with all that has been stated about why prisoners are striking, one of the prevailing issues seems to be wages and how prisoners deserve to be paid more or even paid in the first place. But here's something interesting to conclude all of this with. Though prisoners in states such as Michigan and California are not happy with the hourly rate or even daily rate that they're being paid, at least they're not in states like Florida or other southeastern states here in the United States where prisoners don't get paid at all for the labor that they perform, working just as hard as any other prisoner in any other prison. So though they might not be in the most glamorous of situations, though they might be living in some pretty horrible conditions, one thing remains evident, and that is it could always be a lot worse. Look at some of these third world countries and the type of prisons that they have. But then again, we're not in a third world country, we're here in the United States. And I'm not exactly sure what kind of change will come from this peaceful prisoner protest and strike. All I can say is I hope that the prisoners who are partaking in this nationwide strike are able to carry this thing out just as they intend to do so, peacefully. And I hope some sort of change and awareness is raised from all of this. But you know, one other last thing to throw into this. What really does awareness do if it doesn't bring about any type of change at all? And though some of the demands that these prisoners have listed are kind of out there, they do raise some very valid points. And I do hope that some change comes from this prisoner strike that's taking place from August the 21st to September the 9th.